Marshall in the middle.
OODA loops are sort of the invention of a guy by the name of Colonel John Boyd. Boyd was an Air Force Maverick pilot who he was cantankerous. Yeah, if you can bring up that picture, Will, it's fantastic. The one that's on the screen right now. At the height of the Cold War, the U.S. was basically losing to the Soviets in fighter aircraft production or technical ability. They were building better planes. And as is typical to Americans, we just kept adding horsepower. We said, well, if theirs could go Mach 2, then if ours could go Mach 3. If theirs could go this, then ours could do that. And Boyd basically told the Air Force, you guys are getting it all wrong. That essentially there's two things you have to do to win a dogfight. You have to be able to speed up and slow down faster than your adversary, and you have to be able to turn inside your adversary's radius. If you can make a smaller circle and you can control the rate and distribution of how fast or slow you can speed up or slow down, you win. If you look at the Joint 35 Strike Fighter or any of the Gen 5 aircraft today that are out there, you'll see their ability to almost fall and or float in space. They have the ability to turn differently than aircraft before them. Well, after a period of time, Boyd began to realize that he was having an effect on pilots, because in order for all this to work, the pilot had to be able to see themselves at a point in the future. They had to be able to understand what they were doing, what their enemy was doing, what the aircraft could do. And they had to be able to see themselves in a point in the future so that they could decide faster how to work. So eventually this leads to what are called OODA loops, or observe, orient, decide, and act. And I have said to people, this is probably a critical learning point, and I thank Jason Mustein for introducing it to me a long time ago. But once I found this, it's like finding the Holy Grail, because once you OODA, you can never not OODA again. It's like impossible. You realize that not only do I do this every day, but it's bringing this to consciousness. So you observe something, whatever it is, an activity. You walk out the house and all right, well, I'll give an example. I'm going to walk out my front door and I'm going to see a couple arguing across the street. All right, so that's my observation. I orient to it. What's going on? What I orient to leads me to a decision. Do I walk across the street? Do I go back inside? Do I ignore it? Do I get in my car and leave? Do whatever leads me to make a decision. That decision leads to an action. I do one of those things. I go inside, or I walk across the street and intervene, or I, get in my car and leave. I take that action. Well, that action forces another observation. And then it goes through the loop again. So one of the most important parts is, well, I'll do it this way. Given that that's on the screen right now, what part of the loop do you think is most important? And then what in part of the loop do you think the Army trained you to think is most important? Give it a shot. It doesn't really,
So I think that orient is one of the most important things. You got to figure out where to put whatever it is you're seeing into whatever category. That is a serious, deep computing thing. But I think the Army spends all of their time doing the actions, right? We had the battle drills, the crew drills. This is what you're to do. If you see this, then do that. It doesn't get into the orient part of it. So that's what I would say.
Okay. What are your thoughts, Joe?
I'm thinking action.
Okay.
Is the important, and the decision hypotenuse is probably where the Army's at. So they just keep trying until they figure it out, or think they have something figured out.
Okay.
But I don't disagree with what Will said either, but I don't I don't know. What is it?
All right. So I used to do this experiment with a class. I would hold up a styrofoam cup, a Dunkin' Donuts, the old styrofoam Dunkin' Donuts cup. And I would ask someone, what is this? And they would say, well, it's a coffee cup. I'd say, no, it's not. It's the destruction of the planet. And then they would look at me like I was crazy. And I'd say, what is it again? I'd say, it's a coffee cup, man. I'm like, nope. It's a destruction of the planet. Until somebody finally got it that I was focused on the styrofoam. Because styrofoam doesn't break down, you da-da-da-da-da-da, right? They were focused on the function of the cup. We're both right. Now, why does this matter to the Army? Because I used to hold it up, and if you remember the old, on their label, they used to have, that purple and orange Dunkin' label. So I'd hold it up so that the purple and orange was facing them, and the backside of it was all white, and that was facing me. And I would say, now describe it. And they would say, well, it's a cup and it's purple and orange. I said, no, it's a cup and it's all white. And then they would start, and I go, okay, now why does this matter? Well, let's say I call for artillery, and I'm an FO, so I call up and I want you to drop artillery round on this particular target. And I say, okay, or mortarman, describe the target. And they say, well, it's a building. Okay. And what I see is a mosque or a church or a protected space. Do we see the same thing? Are we oriented?
Correct. We're misoriented.
Okay. So then you look at, so I observe something, and what makes me unique is that I can only observe this, go to Orient, through my cultural traditions, my ability for analysis and synthesis, my previous, experiences with this, how I formulate new information, and my genetic heritage. Whoops, whoop, 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 alert, alert, my genetic heritage, who I am, right? So who I am, we're going to come back to who I am later on. So what Boyd comes to realize is that orientation is the absolute key to making the OODA loop work. So if you go back to the blog, I am only one, but I am me. And I am a unique me. So I better spend some time before I start making decisions. So first of all, I'm the only one who can see this problem set exactly the way I do. Therefore, the decisions I make won't necessarily make sense to everybody else. In fact, they shouldn't. They shouldn't. That's key. Because I would argue that a lot of our peers didn't have the skill set to be able to articulate what they saw and oriented towards versus what they were directions or what they were deciding they wanted people to do. So to Joe, to your point earlier, I didn't want to do it twice. I wanted to do it right the first time. Okay. Well, I can give a kid an instruction, go mop the floor. And they're going to go in the mop closet and they're going to pull out that mop that's been sitting in a bucket of water for about 3 weeks. And they're going to slop it all over the floor and they're going to mop the floor. The floor is going to be wet. Mop will have been used. Kid did what you told him to do. Your orderly room is going to smell like ass for a month. And you're going to try to correct this kid. And I'm going to look at you and go, well, that's what you told Junior to do. Your orientation was different.
Right.
All right. So orientation actually matters. So I can only be me. All right. Well, the Army didn't actually say that to you. They didn't spend any time asking you who you were, how you thought about things. You might have an interesting discussion at PLDC or BLC or a class about different experiences, but they never spent any time developing you to see you and what matters to you. And so you, when faced with a situation and you have to make a decision, I did what I thought was best in Iraq. Could not have known the outcome, made a series of decisions, whatever. And the Army then went back and said, well, we don't like your decisions. Okay. But what they don't recognize is they never asked me how I made those decisions or what went into that process. So I observed what I had and fed it through my orientation, made decisions. Those things had an action, looped it back around again. Whoop, that didn't turn out. So most of this happens for people pretty transparently. You do it every day. You just don't think about it. It's what little things in the world that drive you crazy, right? Why? It's actually an interesting thought about what you focus on, but you walk into your kitchen. Let's say you're a neat freak and you walk into your kitchen and there's dishes in the sink. Is that the first thing you see? Or is it, are you filled with gratitude because you have a roof over your head and you live in a house? Like, what is it that you orient on? Well, that observation, what you're seeing is the end state of how you orient and what your priorities are. So this whole idea of you matter is the key to what I hope is the discussion that we're going to have, is why you matter. And what I think, if we use the OODA loop as the lever, the lens through which to have the conversation, then you can take everything you've ever done in the Army. You can take the Army values. You can take the warrior ethos. You could take the creed of the non-commissioned officer. You could take all of that and you can run it through an OODA loop. And then you can see what answers we come up with independently. And then you go, this leadership thing is not quite as simple as it looks.
Marshall in the middle.